Hey Vince, are you muted on your side?
What about now? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, good deal. All right. Uh, well, good afternoon. I'll repeat myself. Good afternoon, and welcome to our third series of our special brown bag forum on cultural competence and race. And today we're going to discuss cultural competence and transformation as two key areas in this journey in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Today we have a real good group of panelists that will be joining us this afternoon to kind of discuss what we are uh, experiencing in our country, but also too in our work environments. So as we kind of move forward today, um, please touch base with others and try to engage some conversation as well. Um, as we kind of move forward today, we talked about four other areas. We looked at introspection, we looked at marginalization, and then also the last 2 weeks ago, we looked at allyship and how that really comes together and privilege. This week, as we look at culture, competence, and transformation, this is really the start of the change that we're looking at and how it will things kind of get involved with our diversity program. Um, our guests this week are Dr. Billy Vaughn. Dr. Billy Vaughn is a clinical cultural psychologist, and he's with the Diversity Training University International. Dr. Vaughn, would you like to give us a few words about who you are?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we do.
Great. I am, as Vince said, I am with Diversity Training University, or DTUI.com. I am a senior managing partner for that firm. It is a consulting, training, instructional design, and organizational change company. We also have a wing where we certify diversity professionals, and that is called our Diversity Executive Leadership Academy. And I am the director of that academy. I am honored to be here with you today.
Thank you, Dr. Vaughn. We appreciate you being here. Also, too, we have Quentin Williams, who's with Butler, Laporte, and Williams firm. He's a cultural business strategist. Quentin, would you like to give us a little brief intro about who you are?
Sure. Thank you for having me here today, Vince. My name is Quentin Williams, and I'm the founder and CEO of Dedication to Community, which is a not-for-profit organization that specializes in two areas of education. One is upward economic mobility, and the other is public safety and social justice. And I also am a practicing attorney with Butler Lappert Williams and have a media company. But for today's purposes, the work I do with D2C, Dedication to Community, is most relevant.
Thank you, Quentin, and appreciate you being here as well. Also, we have Mr. Kawabaya Abuji. Everyone knows him by KB. KB, would you like to give us some details about who you are here at TDOT?
Thank you, Vince. My name is Kwabena Abuji. I'm originally from Ghana. Lived in the United States since 2006. Been working in TDOT since 2010. I'm a planner by profession. Studied planning back in Ghana, what we call spatial planning or urban planning in America. Moved to the United States and did city and regional planning at the Ohio State University, Buckeye. I'm currently the assistant director for long range planning. Have the privilege of working in different areas within TDOT, from transit to highway planning. So I'm privileged to be part of this team, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, KB. We appreciate it. We also have Jay Norris here with us here within TDOT. Jay, would you like to give us some intro about who you are and what you bring to our discussion today?
Sure. Hey, Vince, it's an honor to be here with you guys today. My name is Jay Norris. I am TDOT's Director of Safety and also splitting time as working with the COVID team to solve all of our COVID problems, which don't seem to be getting better at the moment. So I appreciate y'all working with us on that. Before I've been in the safety division for the last 3 years. It's been a new start. It's been a great time building the team and getting a new program off the ground. Before that, I was an assistant director in our construction division, and before that, I worked in regional operations and the materials and test division. So I spent most of my career on the operations side of the house. Been here almost 20 years, and it's an honor to be here today.
Thanks, Jay. I think you're having a little bit of problem with your microphone on your computer, maybe. If you need anything here, just reach out to Michael. We'll try to see if we can get your mic here adjusted. And also we have Miss Kimmery Grant, who's also with TDOT. And Kimmery, will you mind giving us a few details about who you are?
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this panel. I guess I'll kind of start with, so I'm Kimmery Grant. I'm the manager of the local programs office here at TDOT. My background, I have a master's in public administration. I actually went to law school at the University of Tennessee, and I decided I've known since prior to then that I wanted to do government work and that I had an interest in government work, so that led me to the state of Tennessee. So I've been in the local programs office now for 8 years, and I've been at TDOT for 8 years. So in the local programs office the entire time at TDOT.
Well, thank you, Kimmery. We appreciate it. As we kind of move forward with our discussion, please, folks, if you have any questions, please send those via chat, and then we'll grab those questions. And if we have time toward the end, we'll try to get those in as well. We have a pretty full complement of questions here for our team, and we're going to try to work through those here today. As we kind of kick off here as well, please take an opportunity to send any emails or requests over to our Civil Rights Division email address. Ms. Cherie Hall Crowder is our program director for that and is a main piece of our brown bag workshops here. To get started, our cultural competence section here, my first question I would like to ask the team, and I'm going to start with you, Dr. Vaughn. What does cultural competence mean? I think you're on mute, Dr. Vaughn.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, sir.
That's a good question. We started off using the term cultural competence back in the 90s. And we referred to it as having 4 different components: awareness, attitude, knowledge, and skills. The idea behind breaking it down that way is we look at it as something that an individual either has more or less of. And rather than think about it from an organizational level, we wanted to better understand the developmental process through which people go through in becoming more culturally competent. That was primarily for people in hospitals and police departments and other frontline workers, where they had a lot of interaction with the public and it was a diverse public. These days, we refer to it more as inclusion competence. Primarily, it's the same 4 components: awareness, attitude, knowledge, and skills. The difference is that it has a much broader utility when you think about it. It can actually be important in an organization that is not completely diverse. So it could be a pretty homogeneous organization and still inclusion competence would matter. So that's how we have 4 different components. And there's a process through which all of us go through in becoming more competent. And that's mostly having to do with being embedded enough and having considerable contact with people who are different from you. And I'll talk more about it in some of the other areas that you'll be covering today. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Kimmery, what does cultural competence mean to you?
I think when I originally, thought about cultural competence, I think understanding and accepting that there are cultural differences. I think the first part is understanding that there are cultural differences and, kind of ignoring the fact that we all want to be the same and be treated the same, but understanding that there are cultural differences, accepting those and becoming consciously more aware of those differences. And then, just acting on implementing, like, how do I become more and more accepting of these differences, and how do we implement that into our day-to-day practices of making sure people feel included?
Okay, great. Mr. Williams, what
Yes.
does equity look like within an organization that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive?
So equity, when we talk about equity, we talk about systemic fairness. And just putting it in layman's terms, when I think about what equity looks like, it's when people feel like they have a shot. They have a shot to achieve their dreams. And they have a fair shot. And it's the system that allows them to have that shot. And the system isn't prohibitive. So I think about it in very simple terms. Systemic fairness, the system is set up for them to succeed, and it's not prohibitive.
Right. Jay, same question to you. What does equity look like within an organization that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive?
So I agree with what Mr. Williams said, is that I think that, just in my layman terms, is that there's room for everybody. Everybody has a seat at the table, and everybody gets to play.
Makes sense. My next question. As a diverse organization forms its identity, what aspects of cultural competence does an organization typically focus less upon? KB, I'm going to throw that one out to you and tell me why.
I think Dr. Vaughn laid it out clearly what cultural competence really means. And I think as an organization, the awareness aspect is that one key area that lacks a lot of attention. I believe that being aware of the different cultural differences that exist in an organization and coming out with the acceptance of each of the different cultural preference and attitude of people will be key into identifying that areas of improvement that we can all seek to do to make sure that there's tolerance and that there's education tailored towards acceptance of each of the different backgrounds and preferences that we all bring to the table.
Okay, great. Thank you. The word competence used in an organization sometimes has a performance-based context at times. What are some of the ways to have an effective conversation and sharing of ideas to build our culturally competent environment? And how important is allyship in that stage? Mr. Williams, can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because really the way in which we engage is going to determine whether we have success. And the way I like to educate people to do this is through story. Tell your story. Release all of the shame that you might have about that story, and allow your pain and your vulnerability to be the connecting force. So if we can just allow ourselves to be more vulnerable with each other, of course, doing it judiciously, and releasing the pain that we might have. We all go through challenges in life, so we all have pain and struggles. And then allowing ourselves to also listen, learn, and understand about the pain of others. There's an automatic and practically organic connection that will be reached. And that's how togetherness, togetherness and harmony, and then ultimately reconciliation happens. So tell your story.
Gotcha. Jay, I think you and I kind of talked a little bit about this in recent conversations. I mean, how do we effectively have those conversations and share those ideas? And then how important is allyship at this stage, Jay?
Yeah, so when I first came downtown from Region 3, I didn't know hardly anybody. I was a regional employee, and this doesn't necessarily apply to race, but it was a new work environment for me, and I would spend a lot of time trying to meet people and understand them. And so instead of phone calls and emails, I tried to make it a point to go visit people at their office and introduce myself. And back when we could do that, and we're in a strange time now, and I would see the pictures of their children and their spouse and get to know them, and they would get to know me. And I use the word relational capacity because I don't know what else to say, but I would begin to build a relationship with these folks so that we were able to talk about other things. And so if an environmental permit issue came up or a right-of-way issue, we had some relationships in place to work through those things. So I think that's important. And I'll share, just as a white guy, I'll share that, I was at a prayer vigil after George Floyd died at our local Black church in Franklin, and the keynote speaker ended up, I knew him. He grew up 5 houses down from me in Murfreesboro, and we played together every day, and it was really great to see him. I didn't know he was speaking, but you talk about sharing pain, and he said things and people said things there that I've never had to think about before. And I can tell you that was, some of it was eye-opening to me. And it was some of it was hard, just to be frank, but I appreciated it. And so I think some of that is building relationships, and some of that, frankly, is listening. And it's being in a posture of listening.
Good idea. Dr. Vaughn, I want you to kind of touch a little bit on here as well. Effective conversation, sharing ideas, and how important is allyship at this stage? I think you still muted, Dr. Vaughn.
Allyship has a central role in helping organizations and even our country move towards a place where it is performing at a higher level. And the reason I say that is because you can think about, there was a movie out very recently that was a true life story about two people in a small North Carolina town called Hallsboro, where during the desegregation of schools in the South, and this is North Carolina, there was lots of racial tension. But it brought together these two people in town, P.C. Ellis, who was a Ku Klux Klan leader, and Ann Atwater, who was an African-American woman who was outspoken and a champion of civil rights. And to make a long story short, although they did it kicking and screaming, they ended up in this 10-day experience with each other, trying to help the community come up with a desegregation plan. And they really hated each other. But by the 10 days, they became the best of friends. And it shows the power of contact between people. And they were able to see how much they had in common with each other. So now she could be his ally and he could be hers. So we need close contact with each other, but it has to be of equal status for allyship to happen. It can't be one person has more power over the other that they're willing to wield at any moment. We have to sit down at the table and have a level playing field for that to occur. And we talk a lot about white allyship, and that is critical. We've seen on the front lines of these protests, white people putting their bodies between them, the police, and Black protesters, and getting harmed a lot. And that's the epitome of allyship. On the other hand, many white people want to talk about things like race and other difficult topics, but they don't have a language for it. And what they need is allies, because if they're truly interested in learning from those experiences, they need allies, both white and non-white, to help them be able to have those conversations much, much more effectively, because that's the only way that we're going to come together as an organization or as a country to seriously take on the challenges that we have before us. We can't do it if we are cats who need to be herded and we're running all over the place. And through these types of interactions, we can change that.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Vaughn. Kimmery, how often does our social identities kind of intersect with another person's cultural influences? How can an individual become more aware of, certain implicit biases?
I think, again, with that contact and just having those conversations and, allowing vulnerability and, creating a forum where people can talk and know that they can talk without fear of retaliation, without fear of, hitting this glass ceiling now because, things that you've said or beliefs that you have. I think in order for us to really show our true authentic selves and to really be able to share authentic ideas, sometimes we have to know that we have a free space to do that. And then I think that goes back to the allyship, and knowing that I know that, this person can't present their true authentic self and their ideas. And so therefore I kind of step in and I step up and I help, present those ideas and think about them when we're making decisions. But I definitely think you have to feel that you are accepted and that the culture around you is that you're accepted despite your differences. So therefore you feel like you can be authentic.
Gotcha. When we talk about implicit biases or microaggressions, and we talk about, from an implicit bias standpoint, we're looking at, statements, actions that really are kind of unintentional discrimination acts. And then we look at the microaggression, which are really the subconscious, stereotypical things that a person may have. Is that something that you have, been a victim of at any time, Kimmery?
I think you hear and you see things all the time. I'm more recently in a management position, and so especially at lower positions, you hear it and you see it, and you feel like you can't say anything. The people that you're hearing and seeing it from, they're management. And so you hear things, and I think, I try to be positive about a lot of it and say there's an unawareness. So you hear things that are said that I don't think they realize that that's not okay to say. Mm-hmm. Or saying, hey, we had this really good Black girl that was a candidate. She talked real good, like she could talk and speak well. And it's like, was that not expected, But I think they don't, you don't realize that that's not something that's acceptable or that's not okay to say, or, that is a bias that was there that they maybe didn't realize it. So I think you hear a lot and you see a lot. And then I think you see a lot of reporting that doesn't happen because of that fear of retaliation. Or when you look at leadership and not much or none of leadership looks like you, or seems to present those cultural differences that you do, you don't feel comfortable making those expressions and telling your story at that point.
Thank you, Kimberly. I appreciate that. Same question. when we look at those things, the implicit bias and microaggressions, KB, is that something that when we look at those things that you have to be aware of and have probably been a victim of?
Yes, it's. I've been a victim, and I've also been an offender. I've also done it to other people without knowing it. I mean, it comes back to that cultural competence conversation about um, truly, humbling yourself to understand the people around you and where they are coming from. Because there may be some from your culture, from your upbringing, or where you're coming from. There may be some situations that may be acceptable, but within the culture or the environment that you find yourself in, that may not be acceptable. So being able to understand that, being able to be socially conscious of the situation in an organization, and not just speaking when you feel like it, is going to be key in the way you interact with other people, and also setting the right environment for people to feel part of and not feel that passive aggressive behavior. It's not only done by our words and what we say, but it's also done by our behavior, the way we carry ourselves, our body language, and our interaction with other people are all ways that shows that kind of passive aggressive nature to other people. I do agree with Kimry in terms of leadership. I think that the leadership sets the tone for the environment. If there is an open environment where people feel truly empowered to speak their mind, when people feel truly empowered to express themselves without fear of retribution, then you are making good progress towards allowing people to clearly speak up and be able to come and show their feelings in a way that educates you also. I think the biggest challenge we have is that we have a lot of us or some people that find themselves as victims of the situation but do not say anything. And I think that is a missed opportunity to educate people. You don't have to be angry about it. You don't have to be aggressive about it, but you have to be able to educate the other person and say, that is not okay. It's not okay to look at me this way. It's not okay to talk to me that way. It's not okay to say these things. And I think those are very, very important lessons for us to be able to make sure that we are interacting with people and expressing our feelings to them when these things happen.
Thanks, KB. I appreciate that. Mr. Williams, as cultural human beings, does perception by others of a different race, ethnic group, or gender impact our behaviors? And do you think we sometimes try to make sure we assimilate as opposed to ensure that we integrate our true selves in certain situations? Mr. Williams, I think your mic may be off.
Tell people not to do that, and I just did it. Yeah, it impacts our behavior tremendously. I think it's important for us to understand that um, as we look to other cultures and how we are going to become connected, we have to get to the point of embracement. So it can no longer be just tolerating, can no longer be just accepting. We have to get to the point where there's an injection of love in the process, where we embrace these other cultures, that we're open-mindedness, as my fellow panelist KB from the Ohio State just said, that we are addressing this in a different way than we have in the past. I'm so used to folks talking about the tolerating other cultures or accepting other cultures. We have to get to the next level. And in order to get to that next level, we have to acknowledge that love has to be the very foundation of it. So the cultures that are different, that may make us feel somewhat uncomfortable, we have to be open-mindedness, open-minded, as KB said, and walk into this room with humility and leave our ego at the door and embrace these opportunities.
Dr. Vaughn, I'm moving over to our section on transformation, and one of the first questions I want to ask is, when an organization is attempting to transform itself, isn't there an internal superiority or inferiority amongst individuals that's kind of already established? And how can an organization get past that point?
Well, that's a really good question. Most organizations are inherently hierarchical. So you're going to have built-in superiority, and in the sense that some people will have more authority than others. Under the ideal circumstances, you'd want an organization to become a flat culture. That is, a culture in which no matter what a person's status is in the organization, everybody can be heard. And that requires thinking about the organization as performing best when everyone in the organization has an opportunity to bring their full selves to the workplace in the service of being productive members. If there are things that are going on that keeps us from being as engaged as we need to be in order to give the most to the organization and to get the most out of the organization for ourselves, if we don't feel like we can speak up, if we can't point out where we believe barriers to inclusion are, if we can't speak out against things going on in the organization that are harmful to people, then that organization is not high performing. And in today's atmosphere, it's really difficult for an organization to thrive and meet the needs of its customers, as well as the external as well as the internal customers, to the degree that that hierarchy quelches individual engagement. So I see the two as being intimately connected, and what one needs to do is find out what the existing culture in the organization is around that hierarchy. And we know that inclusion plus a flat organization leads to more innovation and much, much more competitiveness in an organization as a whole.
Thank you, Dr. Vaughn. Jay, Norris, same question. With that kind of already established with the superiority and inferiority amongst individuals, how can an organization get past that point?
I've thought about this one a lot, and I agree with what Dr. Vaughn said, is that we've got to work towards that. And I've thought, in addition to that, I thought, not just culturally we want to make things better, but, we're in an interesting time at TDOT, is that, when I first started as a GTA, the supervisors above me had 35 years of experience, and the boomers were, a lot of them were sitting in the organization. And then it seems like in the last 5 years, that's all flipped upside down. TDOT is as young as it's ever been in my career. And so we've a little bit of that's been reset in a lot of ways. The hierarchy, if you will, has been reset. It's really interesting to see, because I remember a time as a young engineer thinking I was never going to get to be a supervisor. And now we're promoting people. It almost seems the second they qualify, we'll move them into supervisor positions because of just how the organization has changed. So we're at a crossroads. We're at a really interesting time right now. We've got a lot of young leaders, a lot of young families, and I think that to also help with this, both with this and the culture piece, is that TDOT needs to continue to recognize young leaders and invest in them. And on top of that, I think that a mentorship program could work very well and could be very helpful in this. I don't know all the details of that. I think that sometimes people grow through experiences, and this might be an opportunity for that.
Thank you, Jay. Well, transformation requires change, even in diverse organizations like TDOT. With change comes conflict, of course. What are some effective ways to deal with conflict that arises from change in this transformative process? KB, can you give me your suggestion?
Yes, I think conflict is inevitable in an organization like TDOT, but the key is, being accepting of the fact that conflict will come up. And I think that if we accept that as an organization, changing organization that is evolved, like what potential areas of conflict will be, and targeting those and dealing with them is going to be key. The first step in doing that is making sure that there's openness and frankness in the conversation, that we give people the ability and the opportunity to express themselves in a respectful way, of course. But being able to speak your mind and being able to express yourself and clearly state what your frustrations are with the process, I think is key in addressing the conflict that comes out. We can't run away from the fact that there's going to be conflict, but and creating that enabling environment for everybody to feel part of the organization or whatever their role is, and feeling respected in what for us as an organization to be able to deal with conflict when it comes up by having honest, frank conversations and giving equitable opportunity to people, moving people up when it's due, and not just only just promoting up, but also being frank with ourselves and dealing with situations where people are not also performing. Those are all part of the difficult conversations that we need to have as an organization. That it's not only about praising, but it's also about discipline. And being able to accept the fact that if we have to discipline you, we are not only doing it because we want to go crazy, but we are doing it because we have to set a right example for everybody. We have to set the right targets for everybody. We all have to be honest with ourselves, and we have to understand that when progress is made, we have to reward, and when progress is not being made, we have to discipline to get to where we need to be as an organization.
Thank you, KB. Mr. Williams, you're an attorney, and conflict is kind of part of your the day-to-day. What would be your suggestion in this question here, and how do you move to a transformative process?
I think you have to commit to reconciliation. You just have to commit to it, with the idea that when reconciliation is reached, everybody benefits. Mm-hmm. So in order to get to reconciliation, we teach that there are 8 steps. 5 of them are active and 3 of them are passive. And listening, learning, understanding, acknowledging. The acknowledgement is so big because this is where we get stuck. We have to acknowledge where we were, what our history is, where are we now and how do we get here, and what is the path forward. And then that acknowledgement allows us to go into this place of action and to go there with this sense of genuineness that we're actually gonna accomplish something. So listening, learning, understanding, acknowledging, taking action, and then the last 3 pieces of that recipe for reconciliation are very passive. They happen organically if you do the first 5 right. And those are, you build trust. You build trust organically when you do those first 5. And then you get to healing. and then you get to reconciliation. We have to have a trusting environment in order for this all to happen, in order for conflict to be absorbed by everybody in the way it should be, as a positive thing, different ideas, but you have to be in a safe and trusting environment.
Thank you, sir.
Can I just add something for a few seconds?
Sure, sure.
This is a really compelling item for me. I like to have, sometimes there's conflict and sometimes there's resistance when it comes to transformation. And that's all I wanted to point out. And we just need to know the difference between the two, right?
Exactly.
And because resistance is really more about how cultures and organizations work, whereas a conflict is usually towards something that has happened in the organization. So I just want to make those two things distinct when we're talking about transforming organizations. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And thank you for that. Since I have you now, Dr. Vaughn, the next question on allyship, it's an important factor in diversity. You know, how can an organization develop more effective allies to support this initiative and effectuate change to a more inclusive environment?
That's a good question. Start with the middle managers. Leaders come and go. Those middle managers can be there for a long time. And as a result, they are really the gatekeepers for the organization's culture. You can have a great leader come along and shake things up a bit. Let's talk about D&I. You can have and I've known great leaders go in, they at the helm of this organization, but they'll take the time out to roll up their sleeves and be the chair of the diversity committee. We have leaders who do that. And if they stay around long enough, they're gonna create some changes, but primarily because they get those middle managers to come aboard, so that when that leader moves out of the organization, the culture that has been brought about through that leadership, it remains in the hands of those middle managers. And even the new head of the organization feels the pressure to be on the D&I bandwagon. But what has happened too often is you have these great leaders that come in, they really push for diversity, but they don't affect change at the middle management level. And they move out, and you get another leader in, and that's ripe for losing progress towards D&I, because the people under the managers are doing all the work and trying to push it forward, but they're not getting the kind of support that they need at the middle management. So they could be the best allies for D&I that an organization could imagine. But that's one type of ally. The other type of ally is the person who, and mentorship, as was mentioned, is a really good example. Mentors should be allies first. But that person is really interested in making certain that the individual in the organization who has high potential, but is not receiving the kind of support that's needed in order to take full advantage of that potential and for them to realize their own potential. That person takes a special interest in them and champions them and supports them. So mentorship and allyship are closely work hand in glove. And thirdly, there is the allyship between staff colleagues, where it could be something as simple as noticing how a manager always hires the same type of person. And that one individual who is that type of person that the manager would likely give to says, no, this person deserves it. I've seen her or him work. They're just as good as I am, but they have this added thing that I think this organization can really benefit from. Now, you'd think that that person was undermining their progress, but think about it just for a minute. by them showing support and highlighting the contributions of somebody who's not like them in some ways, that gives them more social capital in the organization. So the organization is going to find some place for that person. But we always think that the glass is half full, and there's not a basket of plenty. And what we need is leaderships in the organization that promotes a basket of plenty rather than haves and have-nots and having us fight for what looks like crumbs, and there's actually a lot more.
Thank you, Dr. Vaughn. Same question to you, Kimry. How can an organization develop more effective allies and support the initiatives and effectuate change?
I think it comes through a little bit of education as well, and making sure that we understand that one, anybody can be an ally on any level. You can be an ally, and you can help speak up for the underrepresented. But kind of like when we kind of touched on earlier, but that allyship also still has to be in the leadership. Like, you can't ignore that; they have to be there, because part of the problem is you're underrepresented, and you're not the people that can affect policy and affect progress and make those changes. So you have to have people in leadership that can actually change those policies, make those changes to the process, to actually change behavior throughout the organization. And so I think it's critical that you have allyship there. But again, you have to have it throughout. But you have to have that education, and you have to, I think, get buy-in from the organization. I think most of us love, we do love our jobs, and we love what we do, and we love how we can contribute to the citizens of Tennessee. So we have to really truly see what this diversity and inclusion, like the positive consequences from that. Like, we have to be able to see what this can bring to the organization, and the different, the innovation and the different ideas, and how this organization, the potential, like how we can grow once we include all of that. I think once you kind of get that buy-in, and then you get that trickle down from leadership, like, it needs to come from the bottom and the top, but to make those changes to policy and to make those changes to processes and behavior across the board, you're going to have it on a leadership level.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. As we look at developing a more inclusive and belonging characteristics in our workforce, should allied development only be done with groups that are marginalized, or should we look at the groups that are more in have more power in play there, and why? I'm going to go to Jay. What are your thoughts there on that, Jay?
So, Dr. Vaughn, I'd like to first say that answer you gave on the last question was outstanding. I look forward to going back and looking at the recording and listening to that again. So thank you very much. That was very good for me personally. As far as the things to be done here, I think if we're going to solve these problems, everybody has to be at the table. Not just the marginalized, but those that I guess are privileged would need to be there as well, and that we have to. We've all got to be there and work through these things together. I've been chewing on this a lot, and I feel like I think, and I'm going to speak personally here, is that it's like I need another slug of self-awareness. I want to make sure that that I understand myself and where my weak spots are, and what can grow out of that, and really be a good listener. But I think everybody's got to be at the table.
Makes sense. And all of us have to kind of watch out for our blind spots, because at the end of the day, you're not aware of what you should be aware of in a lot of cases. Same question, Mr. Williams.
Everybody needs to be at the table. There's absolutely no other way to do this. The vulnerable need to be at the table, and they need to have a voice. But those who are in power need to be at that table, and they need to be there with the understanding that they will benefit from this. That's oftentimes the issue, is that those in power are already in power. So they see this pie as being very finite and not being something that can grow. We say that diversity, belonging, equity grows that pie. It makes it larger. Your slice is going to be even larger than it was. And you're going to also have the opportunity to provide larger slices to other people who may have been neglected in the past. So everybody needs to be at the table. Everybody needs to feel like they're benefiting, because there are going to be some people at the table who might not do this on moralistic grounds. We have to understand that. I mean, that's our reality. So if they're not going to do it because it's the morally right thing to do, perhaps they'll do it if they know they're going to benefit. And so we have to be able to message to them that there is a benefit to them individually, to the organization, and to society by doing this work.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. And yeah, I think you kind of touched on a piece that is as well, I think Jay and also KB did, cultural humility. I think cultural humility is a key component. I think, KB, back to you on that, on this question. What is cultural humility in your words?
For me, cultural humility is being able to, as we say back in Ghana, put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Be able to understand and bring yourself down to understand the different perspectives and ideas of other people, which may be contrary to what you believe in. That for me is cultural humility. Not thinking that your upbringing or your environment or your thoughts are much higher than somebody else's, but being able to understand where they're coming from and understand what to them, and doing everything in your power to be able to relate to them at that level. That for me is cultural humility.
Thanks, KB. Dr. Vaughn, how do we allow cultural humility to come into play in our work environment? And what are kind of the steps for that transformation for a large organization to get to that next level? TDOT has about 4,000 plus employees, and it ranges all across the state here. And so, and then we have different regions, different districts. How do we get to that next level?
We did a study of San Francisco Municipal Transportation Authority a little over a year ago. And it was pretty extensive. We got a lot of data. And the only reason I'm telling you about that is because we got firsthand experience with transportation workers in a diverse city. And what was interesting about that is how I'd sit in the breakout areas for the bus drivers, for example. And there was very, very little, on the surface at least, interaction amongst different groups of people, apart from individuals walking over to where the Asians were sitting. You know, a Black person would walk over there, a white person would be sitting amongst a bunch of Black people, and the Latinos are on their side. And I thought that was incredibly outdated, I should say, for a modern transportation system. But it became clear to me over time why that. I'm not saying it was a bad thing necessarily, but it brought up for me how difficult it is for people who are working on top of each other all the time to that place where they can feel comfortable enough that they don't have to be in their own groups. At least on occasion, right? And so I think that's very compelling when it comes to thinking about what cultural humility is. I see the people who go out of their way to make certain that they interact with those other groups as experiencing that cultural humility. And I agree with AW, I think it's his name.
KB.
KB, sorry.
Yes.
I agree that it really is about wanting to put yourself in the other person's shoes and not thinking that your culture is better than the others. For those people who are willing and volunteer to put themselves in the middle of people who are very different from them and go through what people go through when they are getting acculturated to another group. When they do that, that is the epitome of cultural humility. But they're not doing it just, sometimes you have to do it because that's where you're situated at work, or that's where you find yourself in a community or at a church or something like that. But when people volunteer to do that, when they volunteer to do it, that's the epitome of cultural humility, because I believe that most of those people volunteer to do it because they think that there's something that's is enriching about going through that experience. And even those people who find themselves being forced in that situation can go through the same kind of transformation or experience that same type of thing. But there's nothing like someone who volunteers to subjugate themselves in a group of people who are very different from them so that they can find out or discover what those folks' realities are and compare and contrast their own. And if we do that, if we think about how people come into organization where they've been recruited and there's not very many people like them, what they're going through and how the organization can have more humility towards that one individual, then we've transformed the whole darn thing, right? So now we're saying there's something about us that we know is different from you. So we want to subjugate ourselves to you in these certain areas of your work life so that you can thrive here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bond. I want to say thank you to our panelists as we are getting ready to close here. We're getting close to the 1 o'clock hour, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Again, great panel, great feedback, and a lot of knowledge here on this panel, and I appreciate each and every one of you and what you shared today. More importantly, I'd like to thank the state of Tennessee and its leadership with our governor, but more specifically, our senior leadership team here with TDOT. Giving us the platform and the opportunity to do this. Thank you, Commissioner Clay Bright and all his senior leadership team for giving us this opportunity. As we kind of move forward, we have one last brown bag that we'll be doing on this special series, and that'll be happening here in the next 3 to 4 weeks. And I hope each and every one of you who are on today, or those who are not on today, will take a chance to tune in for that one, where we'll have our management team to share some insight and feedback to each and every one of you. Thank you all, and God bless. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and God bless.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.